Good morning, everybody, on this wet Sunday morning as the Labour Party gather in Liverpool for their annual conference, and there is one major topic of discussion. I've been saying for months and months here on LBC that I believe the Labour Party will move to a position where they'll certainly advocate we stay in a single market, but probably they're going to go for a second EU referendum. Well, we're very, very close to the moment of truth. Earlier on this morning, Andrew Gwynn, Shadow Secretary for Communities and Local Government, was speaking on LBC to Andrew Castle.
Of course, we've got to have the debates and the votes on it this week, and I have the misfortune of being interviewed before we've had those. It's not our position to have a second referendum. Actually, the people's vote that we want to have is a general election. But of course...
but will you respond to the members who do want, as Tom Watson and Jeremy Corbyn have said, will you respond to Labour Party members?
Well, of course, we're a democratic party.
Well, 86% of them want a second vote.
And I'm sure 100% of them want a general election. The conference will come to a view. That will then have to be discussed and debated by Shadow Cabinet. Keir Starmer, who leads on Brexit issues, has said that should the government come forward with a no-deal proposal, or a proposal that is not acceptable to Parliament, obviously the people's vote we want is a general election, but nothing's off the table. But there are a lot of questions to be had about a people's vote, not least what would the question be? Would it be on a deal, or would it be a rerun of the 2016 referendum?
Now, Andrew Gwynn there, classic of where Labour have been for the last 18 months. Ask them a straight question and you don't get an answer of any kind at all. It sort of worked pretty well for Corbyn, actually, in the general election of 2017, where he managed to get Remainers in London overwhelmingly voting for him and Leavers in the north of England voting for him by not being clear on where they stood on much of this. Here was Tom Watson, Deputy Leader, speaking to Sky News in the last 20 minutes.
Well, we decide our manifesto in the first few days of a general election, and there are a lot of things you need to factor in. The prevailing economic climate, the whole other packages in there. It seems to me inconceivable that if the Labour Party democratically decides, the Labour Party Congress decides it wants a manifesto pledge on a people's vote, that we would defy that decision. But I'm already in the boundaries of talking hypotheticals with you. I think we need to have the debate at the conference and see what our delegates decide to do.
So nobody wants to commit at all because they don't want to be seen as going against the will of the people in a referendum. They fear that would make them very unpopular out there with many, many Labour voters. But if the Labour Party itself wants a second referendum, they will go along with it. And the Labour Party itself, well, it's a very different Labour Party to years ago. Years ago, of course, we had people like Tony Benn, people like Michael Foot. The old left of the Labour Party were fiercely Eurosceptic. They were opposed to us joining the common market back in the 1970s. They even fought the 1983 general election on a manifesto of withdrawal from the EEC. But the new left of the Labour Party, the new Momentum-style Labour Party, they believe that Brexit was a mistake and we should stay part of the European Union. Quite how this ties with their tradition of grassroots democracy, quite why they want people like Mr Tusk, and we saw his vile behaviour against the Prime Minister at Salzburg, and I don't care whether you're a Theresa May supporter or not, the thought that the leader of our country was treated like that by an unelected bureaucrat I thought was pretty disgusting. But that aside, the Labour Party membership favour EU membership, and they now want a second referendum. And there's a piece of YouGov polling, and it's out in today's Observer, and I have to say it is pretty overwhelming. 86% of Labour members that were polled want Labour to commit to a second referendum. And Jeremy Corbyn's no fool. He's not going to go against his party on this, despite the fact he's been a Brexiteer himself for 30 years. He also knows that the Parliamentary Labour Party is very much in favour of this too. So Corbyn has said he would back a second referendum if Labour members demand to do so at his party conference. Folks, it's an absolute slam dunk. They are going to vote to adopt a second referendum position. Now, my experience of leading a political party is that sometimes what your own activists want, what your own internal party wants, may make them feel very good about themselves, but doesn't necessarily translate more broadly to people who vote for a party. Activists, political activists tend to have slightly different priorities to ordinary voters out there who are not obsessed and absorbed by politics. So I'm going to ask you, will a second Brexit referendum, as Labour policy, make the party more electable? And if you think, yep, the Labour members feel that way, the country's feeling that way, call 0345 6060 973, or maybe you think, actually, if Labour do this, there'll be a lot of Labour voters who'll never vote for the party again, in which case text to 84850. And tell me, would a second referendum be good for this country, do you think? Let me know your thoughts by tweeting using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. And as ever, Facebook Livers, you can comment there too. I will read out your messages, particularly the cleaner ones. Look, my view, folks, is if they do this, when they do this in Birmingham in the next few days, the members and activists, Momentum, all those people, MPs like Kinnock, etc., they'll all feel really good about themselves and think they've done the right thing. But they might just be missing something, which is, if you really look at the polling, it's only about 25% of this country who think we should abandon Brexit, who think there should be an exit from Brexit. Now, I know in general elections people vote on more than one issue, but hey, this is the one that is very much dominating our lives. There are 5 million people who voted Brexit and then voted for Corbyn at the next general election. There was some polling out the other day that suggested that in marginal seats this could cost Labour a significant number of seats. Against that, I guess you have to weigh up, why would you bother to vote Lib Dem? Vince Cable's whole shtick with the British public has been he wants an exit from Brexit, he wants another referendum. They're on 7 or 8% in the polls. But if the Labour Party adopt that position, I think they would then pick up some votes from a Liberal Democrat. So I do see some gains for Labour in doing this, but I think the potential losses far outweigh it. I think going for a second Brexit referendum, as they're about to do, will make Labour less electable. Tell me I'm wrong. 0345 6060 973. And of course, every Sunday morning across all forms of media, there are innumerable radios, shows, television shows, where you can see journalists interviewing politicians, or more likely journalists interviewing journalists, and talking amongst each other in the Westminster bubble. But at LBC, what matters is what the public think. And I'm going to go to Peter in Wimbledon, a regular caller to this show. And Peter, you've always been quite a strong Remainer, haven't you?
Absolutely correct, yeah.
Yeah, so do you think this move makes them more electable?
I think they've been quite clever. They sat on the fence for quite a while, as you rightly pointed out.
Yeah.
Thinking which way the public mood's going to swing. And that's basically the danger of politics in this time, is that Jeremy Corbyn is seeing that public is waking up to the dangers of Brexit, and he is going to be offering the solution. And he himself, as you rightly said, is deep down Brexiteer, even though publicly he would never say that. For me, as a Remainer, the biggest danger is that we will crash out without a deal, and most likely will damage the economy of the country so badly for the generations to come. And I voiced an opinion of one of the leading Brexiteers, one on your side, who said early on that democracy ceases to be democracy if it can't change its mind. So if a lot of our politicians can change their mind, why are you, Nigel, so against people being able to change their mind in light
Peter,
of new facts?
Well, Peter, I would say, you talk about no deal. Well, there is no such thing as no deal in a sense, because, we have an established form of rules across the world by which most global trade is done, and they are the WTO rules. So I would say, Peter, in answer to you, no deal, no problem, although I'd much rather us have a simple free trade deal with our European neighbours, something that they've been saying for the last 20 years we could have. We can argue, Peter, for or against. In terms of, in a democracy, changing your mind, we haven't even Brexited yet. We have to fulfil the will of the people first. And if a few years down the road, people say, hey, this isn't working, maybe in 10 or 20 years, there's an argument for a second referendum. To me, Peter, the danger of a second referendum is it will destroy people's faith in the whole democratic system of this country. So I feel very strongly that way. But Peter, here's the problem, right? Getting back to the question, as opposed to the debate over Brexit, where you and I will never agree, but we do so, I hope, in a fairly civil manner. Here's the point, Peter. You are convinced of those arguments, and I understand that. But it really is only about 25% of the country that really do not want Brexit to happen. And when it comes to wanting a second referendum, well, about 40% say, yeah, OK, let's have a second referendum. But quite a significant number of those, Peter, are Leave voters who are happy to vote again. How does this electorally help Jeremy Corbyn unless a lot more people come to your point of view?
It's all about swing voters, Nigel. And the thing is that people became more informed since the referendum. They know much, much more than they knew then. And a lot of people on your side used to say to the public, guys, we're never going to leave a single market. Like people like Daniel Hannan.
He was the only single Brexit person with any voice at all.
Well, who's Owen Paterson who said you'd be mad to leave a single market? But anyway, coming back to your question, is this?
I'm not sure about that, but anyway, go on.
Yeah, he did. You guys have sold so many lies to the British public.
Oh,
and you know,
for God's sake.
Nigel, but you know.
There's one big lie, Peter, isn't there?
Nigel.
There's one big lie. You're joining a common market. It's not about politics. And they lied to us for 50 years. For 50 years, they tried to pretend we were in control of large sectors of our life when we weren't.
Nigel, the reason you are against the second referendum, because you cannot sell the same lies to the British public again. And the problem is that you can't be driving a bus around the country with £35 million written on the back of it. You can't be standing in front of a poster of Syrian refugees entering Germany and telling they're affecting the British people's lives.
Do you know what, Peter? Do you know what, Peter? If there was a second referendum, I wouldn't change a single thing I said or did last time. I really wouldn't. But hey, Peter from Wimbledon thinks it'll be a good thing for the Labour Party because he thinks more people will wake up to the dangers of Brexit. I think he's wrong. I think Labour are in great danger of losing in South Wales, in the Midlands and the north of England. Big Brexit voting areas with very large numbers of Labour MPs. I think it will cost them seats. That's my view. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it is 10:15. The Labour Party in Liverpool will, this week, without doubt, have a debate, have a vote, endorse a second Brexit referendum, and Jeremy Corbyn and the leadership will go with it. All of that has been said overnight. Jeremy Corbyn making that very, very clear. Does this make them more electable? No, folks. They will be betraying 5 million Labour voters who voted for Brexit, not for the chance to change their minds. Paul on Facebook says, a second referendum equals fake democracy. Andy on Facebook says, I can't believe people think we should have another vote to stay in the EU. We already had a vote. Pompous lunatics. And Philip in Whiteleaf. Now, this is interesting. Nigel, I'm a Labour Party member who voted for Corbyn, but if they go for a second referendum, I will tear up my membership. Philip, there may not be many members of the Labour Party who do what you intend to do when this happens this week, but I think there are lots and lots of Labour voters. I was in Bolton yesterday and in some of the suburbs of Bolton. Big, solid Labour areas, just one Tory MP in the whole of that conurbation. And believe you me, they will not be impressed by a Labour Party that they see to be led from North London that wants to reverse the Brexit vote. They really won't. Staying in the North West, I'm going to Manchester, speaking to Graham, who is a new caller to this show. Good morning, Graham.
Morning, Nigel.
So, are you a Labour man, Graham?
I'm not a Labour man, no.
Okay.
I'm absolutely not. I'm a Tory.
You're a Tory, and what is your view? I mean, you know, you're living in Labour land up there. Labour have most of the seats in the northwest of England.
Well, my MP is Graham Brady, so not really.
Right. Yeah, well, there are some Conservatives, but overwhelmingly...
Yeah, they are, yeah.
Overwhelmingly, it's Labour.
Yeah.
And some of those majorities in those seats are not that big. Does a second referendum make them more electable or not?
I think it makes them less electable, but the question, the whole thing has become slightly idiotic, because the question is, how can Jeremy Corbyn say he would support a second referendum if he doesn't know what the referendum question is going to be? If the referendum question was leave on May's deal or leave on WTO rules, would he support that? And if he did, what are the 86% of Labour members who want a second referendum going to think about it?
Well, the truth of it, Graham, is the driving forces in the Labour Party behind this, as indeed in the Liberal Democrats, they want to reverse the referendum result. They want us to stay as members. That's what's driving this, isn't it?
Well, yes, it is. But who's going to decide the question in a second referendum?
Oh, they haven't got to that yet. No.
Well, but that's
that little detail. That little detail
is so idiotic, because how can he support a second referendum if they've not decided what the question is going to be?
Because his party want to reverse Brexit, Graham. That's what this vote will say, isn't it?
So if a second referendum was agreed upon, and the second referendum questions were leave on May's deal or leave on WTO rules, is he going to support that?
No, clearly the Labour Party would not support that.
But he's just said he's going to support a second referendum.
Yeah, well, the common denominator behind everybody calling for a second referendum, Graham, is they want the option for us to stay in. Some have proposed 3-part questions, etc., but they all want the option for us to stay in. And I think, particularly in areas like the North West, this would cost Labour votes.
As a Leave voter, I wouldn't object to a second referendum if the options were to leave or to leave without a deal.
Yeah, I know. It's not very likely our political class, Graham, are going to give us that. But
who is going to decide the question?
Well, ultimately, the government, the House of Commons, and the Electoral Commission. So, we're not going to get the choice you want, Graham. If we do have a second referendum, there will be an option to stay in the European Union. Of that, I'm sure. Graham, I thank you very much indeed for your call. Andrew, who is new to this show, is calling from Northumberland. Good morning.
Hi, Nigel. Great to speak to you.
Good morning. Welcome.
Hi. Let me just preface my comments by saying, I'm a have been a lifelong Labour supporter.
Yes.
All my family were, but I would say real Labour. The Labour of Tony Benn, Peter Shaw, all those great figures from the past.
Yes.
Momentum's Labour, to me, is not Labour. And that's why I won't vote for them at the moment. But to answer your question...
Andrew, just 1 second. Do you see the new Labour Party, not Blair's, but this new Labour Party that you've talked about with all this dominance from Momentum, etc., do you see it as a very London-dominated party now?
Absolutely. I do speak to some people in the north and northeast who are Labour supporters, but they are overwhelmingly very well off, live in nice, very nice houses, with professional jobs. They do not represent the ordinary working man. Certainly not in the north of England, and I don't believe in the south of England. But I'd like to answer your question. Will this make Labour more electable?
Yeah.
Well, I think it will have the opposite effect, and for this reason, I think Theresa May is a dreadful Prime Minister. I think she's cocked up Brexit in a I don't know whether it's willful, but she's a terrible Prime Minister. But I think it gives her the golden ticket, because she can then say, yeah, you vote for us, you're voting to uphold democracy. If you vote Labour, you're voting for anti-democracy.
Yes, I mean, actually, Andrew, if the Conservative Party was united around a Brexit position, it would literally be a golden opportunity for them, wouldn't it?
It would. I mean, I think... I can't remember the film, Nigel, but one of the Clint Eastwood films, I think there's a line in it where it says, where Clint Eastwood says, "Go on, punk, make my day."
Make my day, yeah, absolutely.
And I think Theresa May and the Conservatives will be absolutely welcoming this quietly, with open arms, because it will give them. And it would be, you either, if you believe in a democratic. Democratic political system, you vote. You don't vote for Labour Party. If you believe in that you're ruled by an elite, kind of semi-fascist elite, then you vote Labour.
Would you, Andrew? Would you? And by the way, at 11 o'clock, folks, we're going to discuss Theresa May and what her next move is, because if she wasn't on this checkers kick, she could actually begin to unite her party, I think. But assuming, Andrew, the Conservatives were able to find some sense of unity, could you find yourself, and you've said, you come from a Labour family, could you find yourself on this Brexit issue particularly, could you find yourself voting Conservative?
If she checkers, you see, Theresa May is all words so far. no action.
No, but I'm taking the assumption, and it may be wrong, but I'm taking the assumption that she comes up with a much clearer Eurosceptic position for a clean break Brexit. Could you, in those circumstances, as a Labour man, find yourself voting Conservative?
Yes.
Okay.
If I really believe it was a clean break and she took the money off the table and said, right, we're going to actually go with, democratic decision, and then maybe offer a referendum down the line, 10, 20 years.
Okay, Andrew, listen, thanks for your call. Great call. Interesting. I think, folks, there are lots of people like Andrew in South Wales, the Midlands and the north of England. They come from Labour families. They've been Labour voters. They supported Brexit. I think if the Labour Party go for this position, and it's a huge if, given the Conservative Party are probably more divided at the moment than they've ever been in their history, but if they were able to unite around a clear position, there are lots of voters like Andrew that I think where you would see marginal seats in those three big regions going from Labour to the Conservatives. That is my contention. Valerio is a new caller from Bracknell. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. Thank you very much for taking my call. I would like to tell you that you are probably one of the best public speakers in the planet.
Well, that's extremely kind of you, Valerio. Thank you. That's cheered up my Sunday morning no end. But as to the question, by adopting a second referendum, does it make Mr. Corbyn and the Labour Party more electable? What do you think?
I do not think so, for the reason that Corbyn wants to appeal to a lot of blue collars, working class people who massively supported Brexit.
Yes.
And if he does go for a second referendum, then all these people will feel betrayed. I think it would be a boomerang for him.
So, isn't it funny? I mean, the Labour Party traditionally have been the working class party of this country. It's almost as if, Valerio, isn't it? The new membership don't really represent traditional Labour voters.
I agree with that, especially with Brexit. If the Labour leader would have been Tony Blair, who was a bit more right-wingish, to some extent, I would have said, okay, it makes sense that they support a second referendum. But because Corbyn wants to, represent those people, but he decides to go for a second referendum, he would betray them. And on top of that, his opposition hasn't really helped the working class people to achieve better working conditions at the moment. I'm not sure whether you agree with that.
I don't think it has particularly, and I think actually one of the problems that Labour had from Blair onwards is that it appeared to be a party that was actually supporting more middle-class types, or in the case of Peter Mandelson saying, we don't mind people getting filthy rich. I think, Valerio, the Labour Party is now completely run by a sort of North London mindset, and it's very much lost touch with a huge group of people out there. As you rightly described, Valerio, it was the working classes of this country that overwhelmingly voted for Brexit. I thank you very much indeed for your call. Peter in Lancing says, I understood this referendum was to be a once in a generation. Another referendum would surely dilute our democracy. Peter, as I say, I was up in Bolton yesterday on a platform, and I was there with Kate Hoey, lifelong Labour supporter, been an MP for 30 years, and one of the comments that was made is if Tony Benn was still alive, he'd have been on that platform yesterday afternoon. His central point about Europe was the problem was it diluted our democracy. Do those arguments still matter to Labour voters? Maybe not at the conference at Liverpool, but out in the country, I believe they do. You're listening to a Sunday edition of Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's now 10:30 and the Labour Party are gathering in Liverpool for their conference, and it's pretty clear there's going to be a debate and a vote on whether the Labour Party should go for a second EU referendum. Overnight polling from YouGov shows us that 86% of the Labour Party members who were polled want that second referendum, and Jeremy Corbyn, despite having been very clear in the lead up to the general election that we were leaving the European Union, we were leaving the single market, is in such a position that there's actually nothing he can do if his party conference votes that way, if his MPs feel that way. And he said overnight in an interview in the Sunday Mirror that he would back a second referendum if that is what Labour members wanted. He was made leader to empower the membership. So we are on the verge of what I see as a huge betrayal by Labour of everything they've said about this referendum from 2016 onwards. I'm asking you, Does this help their electoral prospects or not? I think it damages them in a big, big way. Before that, you may have seen Sky News. There's been a bidding war for Sky News. Rupert Murdoch, of course, holding a huge stake in Sky News, but the controlling stake was up for sale. And the story we had for months and months and months is that Murdoch wanted to buy the rest of Sky News. And that led to a company called Comcast coming in to do the bidding. Now, I'm going to bet that not 1 in 100 of you have even heard of Comcast before the last 2 days. So let's talk about who they are. They are an American broadcaster. They own Universal. They own NBC. Last year, they acquired Euronews, TV channel that is there across Europe that has over 3 million viewers every single day. Now they've got Sky News. Comcast are now one of the most important media broadcasters in the world. And I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see them acquiring more companies. Remember that name, Comcast. They're going to be a much bigger part of our national debate over the years to come. And an interesting thought. When all of this started, Sky News shares were about 12 quid. All right? So Rupert Murdoch says, I'm going to buy the rest of the controlling stake. Suddenly the shares start to rise a little bit. Then Comcast come in and say, we want to buy the controlling stake. And Murdoch says, I really, 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 really want to take this controlling stake. And Comcast say, we really, 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 really want to buy this controlling stake. And so the way it was settled is there was a closed bid. Literally, they put their prices in an envelope as to what they were prepared to pay for the controlling stake, and it went to the highest bidder. Murdoch bid £15.67 for the shares. Comcast bid £17.24. Rupert Murdoch is an 88-year-old Australian. He is a most extraordinary figure. I've met him many times. I have to say, always find him very interesting, very entertaining, incredibly up to speed for a man of his age. I tell you what, folks, he didn't want to buy the controlling stake in Sky News. What he did was to ramp the price up, and he's basically selling that he basically allowed, his share price of what he owns in Sky to now be worth billions more than it was before. Clever old him is all I can say. Right, let's get back to the Labour Party. Charlie on Facebook says, when will they listen? We've already voted once! Exclamation mark, exclamation mark. Roger says, momentum rule Labour now. It does look, Roger, a little bit like that. Andrew says, I would love to see Labour calling for another referendum. That would be the final nail in the party's coffin. Well, you say that, Andrew, but the Tories are having a pretty good job at tearing themselves to pieces. And Lynn says, Corbyn voted against the EU every time. How could he support a second referendum? Lynn, because he is boxed in by his own party, completely and utterly. That's the point. Swivel-eyed loon from Worthing makes. He's boxed in. He's got to cop out. The British voters expect him, though, to represent them, not the Labour Party conference. Well, I made that point earlier on, didn't I? That sometimes what political parties and activists collectively think is the right thing to do may please them in their own echo chambers, but doesn't actually work outside with the broader electorate. Those that want a second referendum will push for a three-way question deliberately to split the Leave vote, says Paul from Croydon. I've seen this multiple choice idea put around. I do not believe the Electoral Commission would allow a referendum to go forward with three different choices, where we sort of rank them 1, 2, 3. I don't believe they would allow that. They've said before that referendum questions have to be simple and easy to understand, and I do not believe a sort of three-card trick, which is what the Remainers would like to do to split the Leave vote, will be allowed. Naomi is a new caller from Stratford in London. Good morning, Naomi.
Good morning. I sort of wanted to address, firstly, the assertion that momentum is sort of a London-centric movement, because, there are sort of many sort of classifications within that. So there's, the working class, like myself, typically young, but then, I feel like I probably have a lot of experiences in common with, maybe someone in the north of the UK or someone in Wales, all these sort of quite segregated, our sort of views, we don't get to interact, and it does create this echo chamber. But I don't believe that, I was very angry at the Brexit vote.
Were you?
Yeah, because I thought, it sort of went against all logic of what was good for this country. Economic forecasts have been vastly negative.
But Naomi, we shouldn't believe economic forecasts too much. I mean, they're always wrong.
Yeah, but then there's experts who have, years of knowledge, and is it not sort of right to inform ourselves? I just don't think the dreams that the people, maybe in the north of England, in Wales, the dreams that they were being sold were, sort of untrue, completely untrue. They were baseless, and I think that's completely wrong. And I think the basis of the Leave campaign was very, very, very misleading.
Naomi, the basis of the Leave campaign, and I've been on the Leave campaign for 25 years, right? And I was part of a party whose main name was Independence.
Yeah, but now there are people who are saying that if I knew what I know now, then I would not have voted Leave, and it's that sort of quite important point that it's you have to vote, and you have to know what you're voting for. Naomi,
it was a vote. It was a vote to leave political union. Do we stay part of political union, or do we vote? Hang on, or did we vote? Or did we vote to be? Naomi, hang on. Let's get to the central point here. There are some that believe we're better off economically, strategically, and globally as part of a political union called the EU. There are others of us who believe we should be independent. And the point that I was making about the Labour Party over decades is the mystery to me, Naomi, perhaps you can help me, is why would Labour members want so much of the power over how we live our lives in this country to be with unelected European commissioners?
But then again, what exactly goes against our interests? What in any of the EU directives goes against our interests? Is it really a dictatorship in the sense that it's being made out to be? I just don't believe that at all.
Well, they have the sole right. They have the sole right to propose law. Naomi, look, that's the argument about democracy. We could expand it at another time. You were angry at the Brexit vote. Okay, I hear that very clearly. Do you think that by the Labour Party conference going for a second referendum, it makes Mr. Corbyn more electable?
Honestly, it's hard to say because, like I said, a lot of those people, those sort of disenfranchised people, voted to leave. And I think it's more important that we understand the reasons why they voted to leave. And it is a sort of,
I don't think it's hard.
It's hard. I think, having grown up and lived in London all my life, been in a very sort of ethnically diverse place, it's no sort of mistake that we didn't vote to leave overwhelmingly because, when you live in a place, when you can see diversity, when you can see how it helps the economy, when they're your next door neighbours, or your friends, they're your partners, then I don't know how anyone would be able to.
I think you'd be surprised, Naomi.
Their neighbours, their partners.
I think you'd be surprised, Naomi, how many of the black community did vote to leave in London. I think overwhelmingly those that voted to remain in London were those that live in houses worth £1 million or more, and there are lots and lots of them. I think this was much more of a class divide based on money, the referendum, than anything else. Naomi, I've got to let you go. We've run out of time. Thank you. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's 10:45. As Labour's about to go for a second referendum, does it help their electoral prospects? Beryl on Facebook says, change of mind, it'd be UKIP for me if they're in a strong position. Well, UKIP actually, in 2015, did incredibly well with Labour voters. They got more Labour voters in 15 than they got Tory voters. Probably helped to get Cameron a majority, strange, or at least win the election. This is political suicide for Labour. It's equal to the Conservative dementia tax. This gives May the opportunity to win a snap election. Well, we'll be talking about that at the top of the hour, because it is now rumoured that Mrs May well go for a snap election. What's happened to politics? Why are we not listening to the working classes? Well, there we are, Paul. Very, very interesting. And Dave says, I was a traditional Labour voter, but if May dumps Chequers, I would vote Conservative. Giles is calling from Oxford. Good morning, Giles.
Morning, Nigel. Yeah, I think, unfortunately, that, it's going to be an absolute home run for the Labour Party, and that you and your callers can have your echo chamber as much as you want. But I think this is a brilliant move, and I think someone said earlier that they've been sat on the fence for 18 months, and finally they're going to have a strong position, and they're going to hoover up some Tory voters, hoover up their voters, and just hoover up all the Remainers, and I think they're going to do pretty well, so bring on the snap election.
Well, Giles, you can talk about echo chambers if you like, but let me just throw this back at you. You know, polling in the Sun newspaper today, when people are given all the choices on Brexit, it's only 25% of the country that actually wants an exit from Brexit. That's it.
But what I would say to that is that exit from Brexit is fine. I voted to remain, and I accept now the decision. We're leaving. That's fine. I accept that. What I don't accept, that, as people have been saying, there are more details now to emerge, and I think the people should have a say on what those details are. And for people who are calling in and leaving you messages saying that to have another referendum undermines democracy, no, it doesn't. That is democracy. That's a debate. You know, just because it's a once-in-a-generation thing, that's a bit of hyperbole. It doesn't matter if it's once in a generation or 3 times a generation. You know,
No, Giles, actually it does matter hugely, because, you know, we've always lived in a system here of representative democracy, but with the exceptional occasions on major constitutional type issues, the people have a say. And to, even before Brexit has been pushed through, be attempting to make people vote again is an outrage, Giles.
Well, people voted to leave. That's fine. We accept that, and I accept that. That's absolutely fine. But no one really knew. You didn't know. No one knew what the outcome of that would be. You're right. We're months away from this happening, and we can see some of the consequences that will be happening, and then amplified once we leave. You know, economic damage and all of these things.
Would be a great country, independent, respected round. Giles, we could argue this both ways. You know, you could say it's going to be a bad thing. I can say it's going to be a very, very good thing. Giles, isn't the point? And you say you accept we're leaving. But those that are pushing this motion at the Labour Party conference want us to have a referendum where we have the option to remain in the European Union. Isn't that the point?
Well, have they said that? Have they said that categorically? Or have they said they will be open to a people's vote?
Every single person who is pushing the people's vote wants the option to be either we accept the deal or we remain. That is what they're pushing for.
I think they're just going to test the water. They'll realise that, yes, absolutely, people would flock to the Labour Party regardless of their previous politics.
But who?
But every Remainer ever will flock to the Labour Party. The Tory voters who are fed up with Mrs May and her dancing in Africa will flock to the Labour Party.
Well, all right. OK, her dancing didn't win her any votes. I mean, I'll give you that, Giles, absolutely. But Giles, surely, 48% voted to remain. But of those who voted to remain, a third of those, quite consistently in the last 2 years, say, look, we've had a vote. We respect democracy. Can we please just get on with Brexit? I just don't see where this vast number of voters comes from.
Well, I'd say, get on with Brexit, that's fine. But if Mrs May is really preparing for a snap election, then bring it on. Absolutely bring it on and see what happens.
All right, well, do you know what? It may come to that. Giles, I thank you very much indeed for your call. Let's go to Kevin, who's calling, another new caller to this show. They're all new callers to this show, and he's from Wainfleet in Lincolnshire. Kevin, hi.
Hello, Nigel. Couple of questions. How many Labour members were actually asked about, do they want another referendum? And also, I'm a GMB member, and now I found out that the GMB support a second vote. Well, nobody asked me. I pay my money each month. Nobody came up to me and said,
I suggest you complain, Kevin, to the GMB.
I have complained, and I'm pushed from pillar to post. I mean, and that's democracy, is it? In my union, unbelievable. Another thing I wanted to ask you is the word "people's vote." It all sounds so nice and snug.
I know.
It should really be called the death of democracy vote.
Well, Kevin, you obviously feel very strongly about this.
Oh, definitely. And if we do have this death of democracy vote and the Brexit people win it again, someone needs to pin Nick Cable down and say, right, tell me, Nick, what will you accept? 60-40 win?
No, Kevin, they will never accept it. They never, ever will. And, of course, these globalists, these pro-EU people are used to having their own way. They made the Danes vote again after a referendum. They've made the Irish vote twice after a referendum. The big bullies have always had their way. Kevin, let me ask you something. Have you always voted Labour?
No, not always. I voted UKIP quite a few times. I'm one of the. I live in an area in Lincolnshire which is staunch Conservative.
Yeah.
So whatever I vote, it doesn't count. But I always make sure I vote. You know, I will always vote for an independent, UKIP, but it's always going to be a Conservative up here. I mean...
I get that. But in other parts of the country, Kevin, there'll be people who are members of the GMB like you are.
Yes.
Who probably always voted Labour because they didn't want the Tories to win the seat. You know, if Corbyn accepts this party vote, which he said he will, to have a second referendum... Isn't that going to damage their prospects of winning?
Yes, because I've spoke about this at work with a couple of Labour supporters, and they've said that they would never vote Labour again.
No.
Never. They voted to remain, but they've accepted it, and they said we didn't like it, but two of them that I've spoken to have said they wish they had voted to leave. They said after they've seen the way that we've been treated...
Well, isn't that the point? Isn't that the point? What a bunch of gangsters, Kevin, aren't they? They're a bunch of gangsters over there.
Well, basically, yeah. I mean, they've trying to hold us. I just wish Mrs May last week had said, do you know what? That's it, we're off. Ta-da. Yeah, we're off. Well, I'm pretty sure you would have had Tusk and his little entourage running after us saying, oh, please, no, stop, because we've got Mr BMW on the phone at the moment and he's worried about his car sales.
Kevin, great call. Thank you very much. Do call. Again, Kevin there, GMB member, saying there are others in his union who do not feel good about this. Sean in Suffolk says, 2 days after the EU disrespect the leader of our government, the Labour Party is still pursuing a vote to remain in the group. Discuss. Sean, you're absolutely right. Didn't they behave abominably? Ian in Runcorn feels quite strongly. Nigel, let's start calling this what it is. A loser's vote, not a people's vote. Let's go to James in Hatfield, another new caller to this show. And my last one on this subject, I think. James, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Nigel. How are you?
I am well. So, does this help Corbyn win the election or hurt?
No, I think it severely damages the credibility of Labour, in my opinion.
Yeah.
As a sort of previous history, a bit of a swing voter in my younger years, sort of mainly for Labour, but I'd say the past decade I felt more of a disconnect to sort of the way they're going about the politics.
OK, this hurts them. James, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to squeeze very quickly. Time is tight. Deborah is a Labour member from Deptford. Good morning, Deborah.
Nigel.
Hello, good morning. I'm sorry time is tight, but you're a Labour member, I understand. I
am, yes. And I joined when Jeremy Corbyn became leader of the party, and I support him in many things, I do think that he is Eurosceptic. Mm-hmm. And I voted to leave, and I just really hope they don't make the mistake of offering, but I fear what you say is right. They are going to vote at conference to vote for a second referendum, but I do think it might lose in the general election, and I don't think it will do much for their standing, really.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy Corbyn is boxed in here, isn't he? He's almost got no choice, has he?
This is it. I don't think he really wants to do it, but what can he do? Because, momentum and that are the ones that give him the momentum behind his leadership, and I agree with him on so many things, you know what I mean? But I just do not... I think at some point you just got to put country before party.
I love that phrase.
You've got to do, because I just think the European Union is so undemocratic.
Deborah,
and if people were educated about it, they'd realise.
Deborah, you've ended this hour's debate beautifully on this by talking about country before party. Absolutely, I agree with you 100%. Thank you everybody for your calls on that. Well, now Theresa May has reportedly begun planning for a snap election in November to save the Brexit talks, and her job as well. This comes after the EU leaders really mocked her plan, and indeed her. We are now at impasse. So, with enemies to the left of her and the right of her, what is Theresa May's next step? What should she do? If you think she should stick with checkers, call 0345 6060 973. Maybe you think a general election is the only answer, in which case text to 84850. Or maybe she might listen to David Davis's plan. If that's how you feel, tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and of course, watch and comment on Facebook. We're live from London next. I wonder how Theresa May's feeling this Sunday morning. I mean, she came up with her Chequers plan. It was something that the Eurosceptics in the country and the Conservative Party thought was an abomination. It led to the resignation of Boris Johnson. It led to the resignation, of course, of David Davis, who I was with yesterday. And then she thinks, well, it'll be okay, because at least Brussels will accept it. And we began to get one or two slightly warmer noises coming from Brussels. And then she goes to Salzburg, where she is openly and publicly insulted. You know, the photograph of all the men in suits and her on her own on the outside, the extraordinary Instagram that was posted by this Donald Tusk fella, cake but no cherries on top. I mean, they just could not have been ruder to her, nastier to her in every single way. They came across as the gangsters that I've often thought them to be, and for her it was humiliating. She genuinely, at that press conference, I thought on Friday, looked wounded. She came back, of course, with a press conference in Downing Street where she said, we have treated them with respect. It's about time they treated us with respect. And suddenly the Saturday newspapers sort of paint her out to be Boadicea. But the truth of it is, she's in a really, really tight spot. She appears strongly to be sticking with her Chequers plan, which I believe keeps her sort of half in and half out, is leading to a massive rift within her own party, and it's clear is not going to be accepted by the European Union. She's in a bit of a hole. And then this morning, front page of the Sunday Times, we get May's team plot snap election to save Brexit. It's reported here that a telephone conversation took place between a couple of Tory party workers, and the question was asked, what are you doing in November? Because I think we're going to need an election. So is a general election the best thing for her? Could she, particularly, bear in mind what we've just discussed, if the Labour Party plump for a second referendum option, could she then call a snap election and say, the only way you get Brexit is with me? That could be enormously powerful in the country. At least it would be if the Conservative Party had a clear position on Brexit. I was very struck this morning by a letter that I read in the Sunday Telegraph, which kind of summed up, I think, where many, many Tories are. Dear Sir, Theresa May has indicated that she is standing by her Chequers plan, and she also says she will respect the referendum result. Unfortunately, these two statements are mutually exclusive. Well, that is how people feel. People want, overwhelmingly, 75% of Tory voters are strong Brexiteers, but they do not want Chequers. So what should she do next? Should she, folks, chuck Chequers? Or should she go for a snap election, particularly if Labour decide they're going for a second referendum? She could win that election, but actually take us towards the softest of all soft Brexits. Now, the most interesting comment I've seen this morning from anybody in the Conservative Party is from Andrew Mitchell, Conservative MP for Sutton Coldfield. He was somebody who was a Remainer in the referendum campaign. I went to his constituency and did a big debate against Michael Heseltine. That was fun. And I've disagreed with Andrew Mitchell, but we've always been civil to each other in absolutely every way. He writes today, his comment piece, again in the Telegraph, he says, I have never known a time of such deep division in the Conservative Party. And he goes on to talk about Chequers, and he says this: leaving the European Union as a rule taker is a recipe for misery, division and ongoing feuding, which would truly deliver for Britain the worst of all worlds and the humiliating failure of the momentous changes set in train by the result of our referendum. They are incredibly strong words from Andrew Mitchell, who, as I say, supported the Remain side in the referendum. And what he's saying is that actually, increasingly, people are thinking, that David Davis's plan is the right one. So what is David Davis saying? Well, I was with him yesterday in Bolton. David is saying, and I have to say, I've been saying this night after night over the last few weeks as well. There is a lot of unity now amongst those of us that really do genuinely want to leave the European Union, and it's this. Rather than waiting for them to come back to us, because that's what Mrs May said in Downing Street. It's up to the EU now to come back to us with proposals. Prime Minister, we've been trying that all the way through. It does not work. You know, the thought that they're going to smash the ball back to our side of the court, that's not where we need to be. It's about time we said to them, look, OK, Chequers doesn't work. We understand that. My own Eurosceptics don't like it. You see it as us cherry-picking from the single market. We're going to leave completely. We'll leave all the political parts of the European project, but we offer you, in return, a Canada-style trade deal where we buy and sell goods from each other without tariff, without us paying money, without free movement of people, without jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. And I think that there's a good chance that they would accept that. Is that the way out? Is chucking Chequers what Mrs May should do? Or do you think she should call a snap election if Labour go for the second referendum option? Over to you. Nicholas in Rotherham, good morning.
Hi, good morning. I joined the Conservatives a few months ago in the hope of a leadership challenge. Now, it doesn't look like that's going to happen, but I'll take an election anytime, as long as Mrs May is not in charge. She has took 2 years to do nothing, and now she's suggesting we do nothing more. We had the vote on. We had the referendum. We voted to leave. Then we had an election. We voted to leave.
Yep.
Are they going to accept it again? We're going to have another election. Oh, vote for us. We'll get you to leave, but we won't. We'll leave you half in. Or we can go to Labour. We'll just completely ignore everything from the last 2 years, and we're back to square one again. I mean, it goes round in circles.
Well, Nicholas, if she uses a general election to basically get her Chequers plan through, I couldn't possibly vote for that, could you?
No, not really at all. Chequers it's not good enough. It's not even half of what I voted for. I mean, if they're doing anything, all they're doing is managing to annoy people more and more and more. I mean, the people I'd have in charge, I can't have in charge because of political differences. I mean, I'd put Nigel Farage in front of the EU and see what they do then, because they'd run a mile.
Well, I'd put Donald Trump. I'd employ Donald Trump, I think, and send him over there for a couple of days.
Too.
I mean, that might sort a few things out. Nicholas, when you joined the party, you joined the Conservatives wanting a leadership challenge. Who did you have in mind as your potential leader?
I'd like JRM. I know he won't do it. He doesn't want the job. But alternatively, I'd take David Davis all day long.
Okay.
The guy's brilliant.
Yeah, I must admit, I'm a fan of David Davis. I am a fan of David Davis, and maybe... And, you know, some will argue, well, he's 68, and is that a bit old? But he's in pretty good nick, I would say. Maybe he'd be a good caretaker Prime Minister to get us through. But at the moment, Nicholas, there is no prospect of her being removed as Tory party leader. And if and I argued strongly on this show back in July that they should get rid of her. They didn't do it. They dropped the ball. Boris just, failed to use the knife, as I put it. And I think, Nicholas, you're stuck with her. Nicholas, thank you. I'm going to go to Milan, who's calling from Chiswick. Good morning.
Oh, Nigel. God, the last few days there's been a lot of chest beating with authority, but it's just been full of nonsense. There's lack of detail. I mean, you were saying Theresa May was humiliated by the EU. You seem to have a short memory about how you stood up and started slating the EU, but Boris Johnson did that. Theresa May started to conquer and try to divide and conquer different EU ministers. The fact is that Chequers was not even on the table. It's a complete garbled nonsense. You have two options. You either have complete independence from the EU, or you have frictionless trade with the EU. You cannot have both. Some people will say, oh no, we'll go for a Canada-style free trade deal. That's fine, but you have to kiss goodbye to frictionless trade. You have to kiss goodbye.
Why? No, come on, Milan. If you've got a free trade deal, that surely makes goods moving across borders very easy indeed, because there's no tariff to collect.
Nigel, stop being naughty here. You know very well that free trade does not equal frictionless trade. You know that. Stop misleading the public now, Nigel.
If there's no tariff to collect, where's the friction?
It's about goods, the regulatory alignment of goods. So
hang on. We at the moment are in full regulatory alignment with the European Union because they've been making our laws for 45 years. So there's no issue there either, is there?
We have a say in the laws for our MEPs and the elected members of the council. It's not them making laws, it's us making laws.
No, whoever makes the laws, that's not the debate we're having here. What I'm saying to you is, we could do a Canada-style deal immediately if the European Union wanted to, and I'm certain European companies want to. It's very much in their interests, because there wouldn't be any issue over regulation, would there?
No, but Nigel, you're missing the point. You're missing the point. Free trade does not equal frictionless trade. The reason we have frictionless trade is because we're in the single market. And so we have goods that align to regulatory.
So what should Mrs May do, Milan? What should she do?
Mrs May, if she... I would just get her a book and the study on the basic matters of Brexit. What she should do, if she was to save her career, is to say, look, I've made a massive mistake. I've made failure after failure after failure. Let's go for a Norway-style model to get us over the line and then kick the can down the road, and then in the transition period, have a discussion of what happens at the end of 2020.
So go for European Economic Area as an easy way out of full membership of the European Union, yeah?
Well, to make it as a...
Okay, no, there is logic in that argument, absolutely. My big concern with it is it wouldn't deal with freedom of movement. That would lead to huge anger amongst Brexit voters. And I wonder, having gone to EEA, whether we wouldn't be stuck there forever. But there's logic to what you say, Milan. Thank you. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it is 11:15. Is Mrs May going to call a general election? Should she call a general election? Are the Labour Party about to open up a massive flank to her by going for a second referendum, and she can present herself as being the true voice of Brexit, even though she isn't? Because the Chequers proposal is not what we actually wanted, those of us that voted to leave. What should she do? Going to go to Jamie in Market Harbour as a new caller to this show. Good morning, Jamie.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you?
I am well. So, what happens now, Jamie? Come on.
Well, here's my thoughts. I think, if I remember right, 36% of the eligible population voted in the referendum. That means
73% did.
Voices that haven't actually been captured in any data.
Jamie, 73% turnout we had in the referendum.
No, I understand that 36%. Now, the figures I understand, 36% of the eligible population voted.
No.
That's how I understand it.
No,
I think, well...
No, 73%. 73% of those on the electoral roll, 73% turned out and voted in the referendum, which is a very, very high figure for modern-day Britain.
I don't believe that's the case. I believe
it is
36% of the eligible population, and therefore I believe it doesn't capture all the voices. And so if those voices haven't been captured, and you've got Labour have obviously come late to the table now, but if they are now saying the second referendum, which I believe is probably the right thing to do because more information is now...
No. Jamie, you're off beam. Jamie, you're off beam, mate. This was the greatest exercise in democracy in the history of the United Kingdom. A massive whopping turnout of 73%. That's the number that voted in it. A quite clear division between one side and the other of nearly 2 million votes. I mean, it's over, isn't it?
More people are informed. Yes, and I know that I will accept the fact that there are people hell-bent in leaving, and even if that means being worse off, I think LBC did a survey. But because they believe in independence.
But I mean, do you think, Jamie, a general election? I mean, let's say she calls a general election. Do you think that would sort this out?
Well, I think she'd be very cautious to, because of the reasons I've just given, in the fact that you're either a Brexiteer or a Brexiteer or a Remainer. And therefore, you are very, very divided. And I think that if the Labour Party do this and go for a second referendum, I think they'll get an enormous amount of support.
Well, Jamie, you may be right, but that was really the last hour's discussion, not now. Thank you. Going to go on to Majid in Peterborough. We've spoken before. Good morning, Majid.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you, mate?
Well, I'm all right. I honestly, I can sort of see this situation where she stands up in November and calls a general election and says, I am the true Brexiteer. Chequers is the way forward. And it really worries me. I desperately want her to chuck Chequers, Majid.
Well, I saw the speech when she made on the other day, and I spoke about it, and she was slapped down. I mean, she was humiliated, she was slapped down. She went around Europe trying to get a little deal behind everybody's back, and they turned around and said that ain't going to happen. So I think maybe it's finally dawning on her that she's not going to get it. Whatever we ask, she's not going to get it. They're not going to give it to us. So personally, my view is, and you know how I feel, Nigel, I think that she should go for an election. She should go for an election probably in end of November, maybe start of December. But one thing they should make clear, that anybody who stands on a ballot should make his position clear on the European Union, on Brexit, which way they stand. So that way, don't in the middle, oh yes, maybe, or maybe
well,
not.
you can't force this, though, can you? But what,
public vote.
But what, Majid, if she stood in a general election saying, I am the light, I am the truth, Chequers is the true Brexit? I mean, I couldn't vote for that.
I couldn't vote for it, but the thing is, Nigel, at the moment, we are so fractured. It's clear as soon as you pick the phone up. We are absolutely split. Families are turning on each other. This is not going to die overnight. We're not going to get a compromise. The only way we're going to get a compromise, and I hate to say it will have to be election, and whether if Labour play their cards right and they win, that's the way it's going to have to be. I know it's not right, but I can't see any other way for this country to just heal ourselves.
Right, so you see
we'll be going on this next year, the year after, the year after.
But I mean, Majid, having a general election is unlikely to be a healing process, is it?
It's a lesser of two evils, I think.
All right, OK, Majid, you've made your point of view. Majid thinks from Peterborough that we've got to do this. Now, I am going to go to Liverpool, to the Labour Party conference, to speak to Theo Usherwood. Theo, good morning.
Very good morning, Nigel.
So what news on the second referendum, Theo?
We're all scratching our heads because, of course, Jeremy Corbyn said that he would support members if they wanted a second referendum. He was facing intense pressure from the moderates within his own party, who had managed to corral members of Momentum, who, of course, are behind his two leadership wins, and then the trade unions as well, to support a second vote. He was facing defeat on the floor of the Liverpool debate on Tuesday. There was no way around it. He had to save face and say, well, I'll hand it over to members. So then that begs the obvious question. If there is a second vote, which way would you vote? And he was asked about that on the BBC this morning and gave this very, well, how should I put it? It wasn't exactly a clear answer.
We're having a debate at our conference and we will come to a conclusion on that. Our preference is that we will demand our 6 tests against the government, and our preference would be for a general election, and we can then negotiate our future relationships with Europe. But let's see what comes out of conference. We're a democratic party. We're very big. It's the biggest conference we've ever had.
And given that, do you feel bound by what the conference decides as the leader?
Obviously. I'm there elected as a leader of this party, elected as the leader in order to bring greater democracy to this party, and that's exactly what I've been doing for the past 3 years.
And will this party get a chance this week to vote on the issue of a second referendum, clearly?
There will be clear votes in conference. I don't know what's going to come out of all the compositing meetings that are going on.
And if, as a result of that clear vote, the conference says, yes, we want a second referendum, will Jeremy Corbyn deliver that?
Let's see what comes out of conference, and then obviously I'm bound by the democracy of our party.
But you'd be if there was another referendum now, with one option being broadly speaking stay in the EU and the other being broadly speaking leave the EU, how would you vote?
Well, that's conjecture as to what the question would be.
Well, I've just given you the question. In or out?
That's conjecture. We don't know what it will be. In the referendum, I wanted to remain and reform the EU. 40% of Labour voters voted to leave, 60% voted to remain. But you know what? None of them voted to lose their job. None of them voted to have lower food standards. They all wanted a better economic performance in this country. The cry of many areas that voted leave was they're fed up with the way they're being treated by governments in this country.
So Theo, he is tacking now much towards this second referendum position with those words, isn't he?
Absolutely. This is a big win for the Remain urban graduates, as James Cleverly, the Tory Vice Chairman, put it this morning. You know as well as I do that since the referendum, Labour has managed to create this confusion on purpose about where it really stands, because it needs to keep Labour traditionalists here in the West Midlands and the north of England on side, because of course they predominantly voted to leave the European Union, and then at the same time keep those younger voters, those members of Momentum who are so influential in going out and campaigning on the doorstep happy because they're big Remainers. And it's these two wings that he's managed to if you like, keep smiles on both of their faces by offering them
until now.
Shadow ministers until now.
Yeah.
So now what happens? And you're talking about Theresa May, and this is where I think it gets interesting. I think Chequers was dead long ago, but right now the talk is that Theresa May ditches Chequers in her own mind, and if she goes to an election, a snap election in November, stands on a Canada-style trade deal versus Jeremy Corbyn, and this is where the second vote creates a real opportunity for the Prime Minister. She stands on the second vote and said, well, listen, I really tried with Chequers. I tried to give the EU an offer. They rejected it. Let's go to no deal. Let's go to just a simple trade deal with the European Union. And then Jeremy Corbyn turns around and says, well, let's have a much softer Brexit. And Theresa May thinks that would be, the calculation is that would be a real vote winner with traditional Labour supporters.
Yes.
And she could overcome that hurdle. She could secure a bigger majority than the 15 to 20.
Yes, I mean, she could secure a majority, pretending for it to be a true Brexit, and then give us a soft Brexit with the cushion of a majority, I guess. But, hey, Theo, we'll talk to you in the next few days. Well, that was Theo Usherwood there from Liverpool, from the Labour conference, and it's pretty clear, isn't it? It's pretty clear that what is going to happen in the next few days is Labour will endorse a second referendum. It is an electoral opportunity for Mrs May, if, of course, she did as Theo suggested and stood on a Canada style. We're going to go for free trade. We're leaving all political linkage. We'll go for a Canada deal. They'll accept it because actually BMW sell a third of their cars overseas in this country. I think if she did that against the Labour Party that wanted a second referendum, I think she'd win quite a big majority. Whether then, in government, she'd stick to her promises is, of course, a very, very separate issue. Morning, Nigel. A general election now will end in disaster for the country. May needs to be removed now and replaced by a Leave supporter before any election. I cannot vote Conservative. They do not currently represent my political beliefs, and I would never vote Labour. I would vote UKIP, but it remains on rocky ground and is still seen as unprofessional and too far to the right. Well, I have to say that the chances, folks, of Mrs May being removed, I think, get slimmer and slimmer with every week that passes. And I was very struck that when she stood up and said, we've treated them with respect, they must treat us with respect, and she's painted like Boadicea the next day in the Tory press, I thought, yeah, that's got her through the conference. She's very, very good at staving off the 48 letters going into the chairman of the 1922 committee. She is a very good political survivor, whether you like politically what she does or whether you don't. I find it, I have to say, I find it agony to watch her as Prime Minister, standing up, making big Eurosceptic speeches, and then making a whole series of concessions. But when Labour, this week, vote to be the party of a second referendum, vote to be the party that effectively wants to overturn the Brexit vote, the door is open for her to get a big majority. I think a general election, once that Labour vote goes through the conference, I think a general election becomes quite a possibility. Not saying it's right, but quite a possibility. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's 11:30. And so does Theresa May call a snap election in November, particularly after the Labour Party will adopt this week a position to adopt a second referendum? There is still a clear majority, folks, out there in favour of Brexit. That is a fact. What are the risks of that? Well, in terms of policy, she can sell herself as the true Brexiteer, even though she really isn't. But, hey, she's really good. She's really good at making big speeches and pretending to be other than she is, and every single time the Tory press fall for it and paint her out to be a heroine, Margaret Thatcher Mark II. So that bit would probably work. But the real risk is, do you remember the last election? She was 21 points ahead in the polls. And the more the public saw of her, and the more the public heard her, the less the public believed in her. She got found out by the campaign, whereas Jezza went round the country like a sort of cool family uncle, offering money to students and to everybody, and he was kind of the cool kid on the block. When it came to the last general election campaign, Corbyn did well, May did appallingly, and that would be the biggest risk of this, that once again, in personality terms, she gets found out by the campaign as just being too wouldn't. Kevin on Facebook says, who do we vote for to ensure leaving the way we voted? Well, Kevin, that is the problem. But if this general election does come, that is exactly how May will position herself. Now, Kevin, let me say this to you. If she dropped Chequers and did, as LBC's political editor Theo Usherwood suggested a few minutes ago, go for free trade and no political linkage, then Kevin, she would be appealing directly to you. She would be saying, I will honour the Brexit vote in every way. Whether then, once she's got a comfy majority, she turned her back on that remains to be seen. I do have a huge problem believing what she says. Gina thinks Mrs May's got to get on with it and move quickly and swiftly in the interests of the country. Others feel very differently. May should resign now. I want a Brexit voting leader of the Tory party to take over, negotiate a free trade deal, and hold a general election on a full Brexit manifesto. I can't vote Conservative if May is leader, and that's the problem. Too many people simply just don't believe in her. On Twitter, I get that Conservatives dare not call an election, at least until they have the boundary changes implemented. Well, of course, the boundary changes would mean that each seat in Westminster was represented by pretty much the same number of constituents. And at the moment, Labour have a very, very big advantage here. They have to get fewer votes per MP than the Conservatives do. The point of the boundary reviews was to reduce the number of MPs to 600 and to have pretty much equivalence between the numbers representing each constituency. That probably would cost the Labour Party 20 to 25 seats. But there is zero prospect of those boundary reviews going through, zero, before any snap election happening in October. Nigel, I recently heard an LBC caller describe May's speech as Churchillian. Oh, dear. I would go one further, assuming the caller was referring to that insurance-selling bulldog who sits on the back shelf of a car, accommodatingly nodding, oh, yes. I'd say her dialogue with Brussels over the last couple of years could similarly be described as this. Fighting talk now is all well and good, but at this late stage of negotiations, it's surely too little too late. Mike in Bedford, love the message, but isn't it amazing? All she says is they should treat us with respect because we treated them with respect, and she's a heroine. I wish she'd said no British Prime Minister should be spoken to by unelected, jumped-up bureaucrats like Tusk in this manner. Now that I would have cheered. I didn't hear it, unfortunately. The Tories need to wait for the boundary changes before another election. Well, Chris, in Darlington, you see quite a few of you now onto this, but they haven't got on and done it. They will not have that option. Michael is calling from Muswell Hill. Hi, Michael.
Oh, hi, Nigel. Maybe I'm one of the few people. I've never voted Tory in my life.
Okay.
And probably won't, to be honest. But it seems to me Theresa May is one of the few politicians who recognises that the electorate is split down the middle. And any solution that we come forward with has got to recognise both sides of that division. It seems to me it's very easy as a Brexiteer or a Remainer to play to your own gallery. But if we come up with a solution that simply satisfies the Brexiteers, almost half the population is going to be unhappy. If we come up with another vote that satisfies the Remainers, then the other half is going to remain unhappy. So the only way forward, it seems to me, that you can bring the country with you is to come up with a solution in a way where nobody's completely happy, but everybody's sort of half happy, half unhappy.
Well, that's what she's been trying to do, Michael. But, there's an old saying, you can't please all of the people all of the time. And actually, by trying to please everybody, she's finished up pleasing nobody, Michael.
I know, Nigel, but we have an electorate that is in a way, the positions in the referendum are polarised opposites. But the reality is, the reality of the electorate is there's a lot of grey. There's a lot of people in between the extreme of the Brextremists on one hand and the Remainers on the other. Probably the vast majority.
Hang on, Michael.
Are in the middle somewhere.
Michael, how am I a Brextremist? I believe. Hang on. I believe in us being an independent country. How is that an extreme position?
Well, what I would say to you, Nigel, is that both camps, whether you're a Remainer or Brexiteer represent possibly half the population, maybe either side of that middle line. So to go forward, Nigel, it seems to me you have to have a compromise. And you yourself said of the Chequers deal about 20 minutes ago, half in, half out, and I thought, Nigel, spot on. And whatever the detail we come up with, it is going to be half of something and half of something else. Otherwise, you leave half the population behind.
Well, I don't agree with you, but you've made your point very clearly. And if we are going to go for a half in, half out type situation, if that's where we're going to end up, I really hope we don't, but if that's where we're going to end up, Mrs May maybe then, in your view, is the right person to do this.
I believe the woman, and I said I've never voted Tory in my life, so I probably never will, but I think she has an incredibly difficult job. It is very easy to sit on the sidelines and pay to your own gallery. She has, as Prime Minister of this country, has got to bring the whole population together and forward. And, when the ERG, I think they're called, were asked to come up with a solution, well, they were found to be wanting in reality. And actually, and your mate Boris ran away when he could have stood up and be counted. So actually, I have a lot of time for the woman.
Okay.
But she is stuck in there.
Okay.
Really
No, Michael, you've made the point beautifully. I thank you very much indeed for your call. If Mrs May calls a general election, it could be seen as an escape route. She has committed herself to no second referendum, says Terry in Worthing. Well, Terry, she could fight a general election on, we're not having another referendum, we're leaving, and Labour would fight it on having another referendum. It would potentially give her a very big electoral advantage. Chris in Ottershaw says, what you've been saying is right. Walk away, let the EU come to us. Self-interest will kick in and they'll give us a good deal. Chris, what I'm saying is, let's put a deal on the table to them. There we are, guys. That's our final generous offer. Take it or leave it, and they would come back and agree. That's my view. Kevin is a new caller to this show. He lives in Warrington. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning, Nigel.
Welcome.
I've voted Labour from the age of 18, and I'm 65 now.
Yep.
And I voted Brexit. And what Theresa May's trying to do isn't Brexit for me. If she went for the Canada-style option, I'd accept that.
Now, would you? Now, Kevin, you've been voting Labour for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
If she came out with a clear, all we want's free trade and friendship and no political linkage, could you really bring yourself to vote Conservative?
Yes.
Wow.
It's that strong with me now, this Brexit. It's a one issue with me now.
Yeah. Kevin, I think there are potentially 2 or 3 million of you out there. I think there are 2 or 3 million of you out there who have naturally been Labour, but this is now so important. But Kevin, she's got to clean her act up as far as you're concerned as a Brexiteer.
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah.
Do you think she can do it?
Well, not really, no. I think she's really a Remainer and she's trying to appear as a Brexiteer, but she's not. I think really she needs to go. And somebody else.
Well, I've been saying that for a long time on this show, Kevin, but it's not been happening. Kevin, thank you for your call. Again, you see, we had a caller in the last hour from Northumberland. There's another caller there from the north of England. He's 65. He's been voting Labour since he was 18. But if Mrs May was clear about really wanting Brexit, he would vote Conservative. If they did it, then even with her own personal failings and lack of campaigning skills, I think they could win a very easy majority. That is my view. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it's 11:45. Surrounded by enemies in her own party, enemies in the European Union. No one, it seems, supports the Chequers proposals. Well, about 12% of the country do, in an opinion poll published this morning. 12%. It's not really a very good number. Yet she appears to want to plough on with Chequers, and now we're told she could call a general election. And actually, if the Labour Party this week do, as we're virtually certain they will, plump for a second referendum, effectively become a Remain party, then, hey, she may get some benefit from it. Alan on Facebook says, Corbyn will go into this general election with a 15-point lead over May, not a 20-point deficit. Alan, you're wrong, mate. If Labour adopt this second referendum, just you wait and see what the opinion polls say about Labour at the next weekend. I am absolutely certain of this. I was in a Labour stronghold yesterday. I was in Bolton, and there are so many areas like Bolton. They are Leave areas, they are Labour areas, there's one Tory MP, but predominantly Labour areas, and actually this will go down like a lead balloon with the people I met in a couple of the pubs yesterday lunchtime on the outskirts of Bolton. It will not do them any good at all. Neil says, this is a case of Ramonas pushing us towards civil unrest. Dave says, we voted Leave, nothing in the middle. There isn't much in the middle, Dave, I agree. Leave means leave. What does Mike in Pickering think? Good morning, Mike.
Good morning. Like every other those northerners, the sooner we out full stop, the better.
I have to say, one thing I do like about the north of the country is you know where people stand on things, don't you?
Well, it's not only that, Nigel. We open our eyes. We don't need a bus to tell us how much we're losing to the European Union.
Right.
We're actually experiencing it. Not like London, that's cushy.
Yeah.
We have no public services up here. It's appalling.
Yeah, that point was being made to me yesterday as well, I can assure you. But the counter-argument, Mike, is that London pays all the taxes. But hey, we'll do that. We'll do him. And why on earth are we spending 100 billion quid on HS2 to benefit commuters and businessmen that can be in Manchester in 2 hours anyway? Mike, that's for another day. You got me worked up there. So, now, back to the question. Is Mrs May going to call an election, and is that the right thing for her to do?
Well, what I can understand is whatever happened to the Fixed Term Parliament Act of 2011?
It's still in place. No? It's still in place. So for this to happen, she would need to get 2/3 of MPs to agree. But the Labour Party, of course, would agree. And if it was Conservative Party policy, they would agree. So this Act of Parliament is there, but it doesn't really mean that much.
Well, it's not only that. I mean, those who wanted to leave, like Jacob Rees-Mogg, etc., need to move quickly now and call a bluff or call a motion of no confidence against her. But you still need a fortnight if, kind of majority of MPs want another election. So that's 14 days.
Yeah.
You would be well over November. But there's a lot more to this. I will listen to John McDonnell yesterday.
Yep.
And I think Watson needs to be careful what he wishes for, extremely. Because you were right in your article, absolutely right, that you can't nationalise the railways if we're still in the EU.
Yeah, no, I made that point. You're absolutely right. And this is one of the bizarre things, that there are so many things that Labour appear to want to do that you could not do as EU members. No, I get that, Mike. I do get that. So how do we... So where do you, Mike, from Pickering, how do you see this Mrs May talked about impasse between her and the European Union, but this deadlock in British politics, how's it going to get broken?
First of all, she admits a mistake. If Brexit means Brexit, she's true to her word.
Yep.
She just leaves.
Yep.
Then she just goes with it. Kind of everything. She just comes out WTO completely. Because Brexit means bumbling Westminster, and you don't want to leave Westminster in charge of Brexit any longer. We just leave.
Would an election, Mike, on a manifesto that you agreed with, would a general election sort this out?
No. But more to the point, I agree with McDonnell that we need to nationalise the railways.
Okay.
So, the East Coast main line worked brilliantly when they had to withdraw.
Yeah, a lot of people say that. I've never been greatly in favour of nationalisation. I generally think the state does things badly, but that argument on the East Coast line has been made. Mike, thank you, and Mike pointing out that so much of party manifestos can't be done if you govern from the European Union. Peter says, I hate the Conservatives, but I will vote Conservative to save the country, i.e. to deliver Brexit, if Labour is for Remain. I will never vote Labour in that case. Nigel, please let Labour leaders know how many Labour supporters feel this way. Peter, I have been trying to do so for some time. I'm staying in Yorkshire. I'm going to Hull to speak to Angus, a new caller to this show. Hi, Angus.
Good morning to you, Nigel.
Good morning and welcome.
Nice to talk to you.
Welcome.
Bolton, Brighton, Howden, actually, is where I'm from. East Yorkshire.
I was with your member.
You were with
Parliament.
DD yesterday,
I was. There's quite one or two entertaining photographs in the newspapers of us today. But so Angus, what's to be done? What should the Conservative Party do? What is Mrs May's next big move?
Very good question. Very good question indeed. I mean, I think, Nigel, and I agree with many things that you say, there's got to be something clear on the mandate if we're going to go to a general election.
Yes.
I think what you said, I completely agree with. Get the people on your side. The people voted for this, for goodness sake.
Twice.
And, yes.
Twice.
And be clear about what the mandate is. It could be, the Labour Party could be opening up a great opportunity. If they vote for this thing today or over the next couple of days at the Labour Party conference, to offer a second referendum, and quite rightly, it's not a people's vote; it's a corporate vote from people who don't see, and don't want to trust the people of this country. 17.4 million people of them who voted to leave the EU.
Yep.
We need a clean Brexit, and if the Prime Minister, if she remains in place, goes to the country on those kind of terms, Nigel, then there's a chance of a decent general election victory, and to honour the vote, because as we know, if we don't honour this vote, the biggest popular vote we've had probably in our history.
Angus, what it does, I mean, I've got a message just come in here as you've been speaking to me from Charlie on Facebook, who says, we had a democratic vote, the result was leave. If we don't, democracy is dead. It's a fair point, Angus, isn't it?
It makes a complete mockery of our democracy. And, the Irish have been bullied into having a couple more votes.
The Danes.
We should. It reminds me, Nigel, of a film I saw earlier in the summer. I took my kids, I took my dad to it, called The Darkest Hour.
Yep.
When Winston Churchill was being told, we're too small, we're too pathetic, we're too this.
Let's do a deal with Hitler. That was the establishment view, wasn't it?
Hitler.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Absolutely.
That's what they wanted. And luckily he didn't. There are times to be brave, there are times to go it alone. Angus, great call. Thank you. On Twitter, I get Chuck Checkers. If she chucks it and goes for Canada, then unpopular or not, she would gain a majority. And I have to say, I think that is absolutely true. I wouldn't trust her, of course, having been elected, to honour it, because I don't trust her one bit after her performance as Home Secretary and Prime Minister. But I think maybe Labour is about to really give her a huge electoral gift. My last caller on this subject this morning is Chris, who's calling from Barnet. Chris, what does Mrs May do now?
She will... What she'll probably do is she either step down 2 weeks after the 29th of March, or if she doesn't get any sort of when they come back, it's in a few days' time from the recess. It's a few days' time, isn't it?
Yep.
Back to Parliament. If she feels that she doesn't have her work, feels that she's not backed by more than half of our party, she might step down in the next 2 weeks.
Oh, but she's not going to step down now, Chris, and cause a leadership crisis right in the middle of the crucial phase of trade negotiations, is
probably
she?
not, no.
I mean, that isn't going to happen.
But she probably wants to.
Well, I don't know. Chris...
Oh, hang on, because what it is that... you become... Well, become a cult figure over the last 10 years.
Right.
And the thing is, I'm a Remainer. I see that there's more losses than gains when we leave on the 29th, because all the deals have to be done by next month, don't they?
Chris, what price independence? What price freedom? What price running our own country and not having those awful thugs and gangsters telling us what to do? Chris, I'm out of time. I'm sorry. We could continue that for a lot longer. But we are finished. We are out of time. Fascinating. Will Labour vote to endorse that second referendum? I believe they will. I think it'll damage them hugely. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'm back tomorrow night at 6. This afternoon at 3 o'clock it's Ian Payne. But up next, it's Majid Nawaz.
Thank you, Nigel.